I thought I knew my husband, until I found out he cheated on me, the night I was in the NICU with our premature baby. 6 weeks of fear, tears, and sleepless nights. And he betrayed me when I was at my most vulnerable. I couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop shaking, and part of me wanted to disappear entirely. But then, I made a choice that would change everything and finally give me the power I thought I'd lost forever. Would it be worth it, or would it destroy me too? I still remember the way life used to feel simple before everything fell apart. Back in 2021, I thought I had it all figured out. I was 29, newly married to James, the man I thought was my forever, and we were expecting our first baby. I had always imagined motherhood would be messy and magical, filled with sleepless nights, little socks scattered around the house, and that intoxicating new baby smell everyone talks about. We had been together for 5 years before getting married. I met James at a friend's birthday party in downtown Austin. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but his charm was magnetic in a quiet, confident way. He had this ability to make everyone around him feel like the most important person there, and honestly, that was what pulled me in first. We dated, fell in love, built a little apartment life together, and eventually, he proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Travis. It wasn't flashy, but it felt intimate and perfect. That was us, simple, grounded, and safe. At least, I thought so. When we found out I was pregnant, everything shifted in a way I wasn't ready for. Suddenly, my whole world revolved around this tiny heartbeat growing inside me. James seemed excited at first. We'd stay up late talking about baby names, scrolling through Pinterest nursery ideas, and dreaming about what kind of parents we'd be. But slowly, I started noticing cracks I couldn't quite explain. James became distant, subtle at first, longer hours at work, muted responses when I'd gush about baby milestones, an increase in Guy's nights that left me home alone with swollen feet and cravings. Whenever I brought it up, he'd brush me off with, "I'm just stressed, babe. Providing for us isn't easy." And I believed him. I wanted to. By the 3rd trimester though, things weren't feeling right between us. My body was changing in ways I couldn't control, and emotionally, I felt like I was carrying this pregnancy mostly on my own. He was there physically, at ultrasounds, buying the crib, assembling the stroller, but emotionally, I felt like I was slowly disappearing in his world. I told myself it was just a phase, that once the baby came, things would feel different. I was wrong. At 34 weeks, I went into unexpected preterm labor. Everything about that night is burned into my memory. The panic, the rush to the hospital, the sterile smell of the NICU. Our daughter Ava came into this world too early, weighing just 3 pounds, 7 ounces. She was so tiny, so fragile, hooked up to tubes and monitors that beeped constantly. For 6 straight weeks, my life became the NICU. I barely slept. I pumped every few hours. I cried silently in the hospital bathroom more times than I can count, terrified something would happen to her. And through it all, James, he was there, but not really there. He'd show up late some nights, claiming work emergencies. He'd sit beside me, scrolling on his phone, barely looking at our daughter. At the time, I convinced myself he was just overwhelmed, maybe coping differently. I didn't realize the truth yet. I remember one night in particular, March 3, 2022. It was Ava's 3rd week in the NICU, and I was emotionally wrecked. I asked James if he could stay with me overnight, just to be there, just so I wouldn't feel so alone. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and said he'd be back after grabbing a quick drink with the guys. He never came back that night, and I didn't know it then, but while I sat beside our premature daughter, clinging to hope, my husband was across town, with someone else. That realization wouldn't hit me until later, but looking back, I see the signs. I see all of them now, and I wish I could go back and shake myself awake. Back then, though I was still living in the illusion, still clinging to the idea that we were a team, I thought once Ava came home, once we could finally be together as a family, things would get better. I had no idea my marriage had already begun to rot from the inside. The night Ava finally came home from the NICU should have been the happiest night of my life. After 6 long, endless weeks of alarms, sleepless nights, and living out of a hospital bag, I thought bringing her home would mark the beginning of something beautiful, a reset button for our little family. It was April 14, 2022. I remember every detail like it happened yesterday. The soft hum of the air purifier in her nursery, the pale yellow blanket wrapped around her tiny body, the way she gripped my pinky with her impossibly small hand. I stood there, watching her breathe, terrified to even blink too long, worried something might go wrong. James walked in behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. He murmured something about how beautiful she was, but his voice, it didn't sound like his. Detached, hollow, like he was reading lines off a script. I brushed it off. I wanted peace, not paranoia. That night, exhaustion swallowed me whole. I woke up around 2 a.m. to Ava's cries, and James wasn't beside me. I figured he was in the kitchen warming up a bottle, but when I walked out, the kitchen was dark. His phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up briefly, and for reasons I still can't fully explain, I picked it up. I wasn't the kind of person who snoops. I trusted him. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew I couldn't. That's when I saw her name. A woman I didn't know. A string of unread messages. My heart stopped, my stomach churned, and my hands started shaking as I unlocked his phone. The first message read, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." And then another, "Wish you could come over tonight." The timestamp hit me like a punch to the gut, March 3, 2022. The exact night I begged James to stay with me at the NICU. The exact night I cried in a hospital bathroom, terrified we'd lose our daughter, while my husband was out sleeping with someone else. I don't remember breathing. I don't even remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the cold kitchen floor, clutching his phone like it burned my skin. My mind raced through every single moment over the last 2 months, the late-night drinks, the extra work meetings, the distant look in his eyes. It all snapped into focus, and the weight of it crushed me. When he came back inside, I asked him where he had been. He mumbled something about taking out the trash. I didn't confront him. Not then. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was caving in. The betrayal was too big, too loud, too raw to even put into words. The next few days blurred into each other. I'd take care of Ava during the day, rocking her tiny body against my chest, and then I'd collapse at night, pretending to sleep while my mind replayed everything I had read. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break every glass in the house. I wanted him to hurt the way I was hurting. But more than anything, I wanted to understand why. Why would he do this to me? To us, when we were at our most vulnerable. I didn't get an answer. Not from him anyway. When I finally confronted him a week later, he denied everything at first, claiming she was just a friend, that I was overreacting, because of hormones, that I needed to calm down and focus on Ava. But I had the messages. I had proof. When I showed him, he froze for a moment, then shifted the blame. He said things like, "You haven't been the same since the pregnancy." And I felt neglected. I needed comfort. Neglected. That word cut deeper than any confession of cheating ever could. I had been living on 3 hours of sleep, hooked up to a breast pump every 2 hours, eating hospital vending machine food, terrified our baby wouldn't make it. And he said he felt neglected. That was the moment something inside me broke. I stopped trying, stopped begging for explanations, stopped fighting to fix what he had already destroyed. I kept it together on the surface, for Ava, but inside, I was crumbling. Postpartum depression wrapped itself around me like quicksand, and every day felt like I was sinking further. I'd look in the mirror, and barely recognize the woman staring back. I had dark circles under my eyes, my body felt alien, my marriage was shattered, and the man I thought I knew better than anyone had become a stranger in my own home. I tried therapy. Alone, of course. He refused to go, claiming he didn't believe in that crap. My therapist said betrayal trauma often feels like grieving a death, and she was right. It felt like mourning the man I thought James was, the future I thought we'd have, the version of myself that used to believe in love so blindly. There were nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying that March evening in my head over and over again. I pictured myself in the NICU, holding Ava's hand, whispering prayers under my breath, while somewhere across town, James was undressing for someone else. The thought made me physically ill. I wanted revenge, badly, but at first I didn't act on it. I told myself I was better than that sinking to his level wouldn't fix anything. Still, the anger festered inside me like an open wound. And then, one night, about 3 months later, something shifted. James came home late again, smelling like cologne that wasn't his. He fell asleep on the couch without a care in the world, while I sat there rocking Ava, my chest pounding with silent rage. That's when the thought planted itself in my head for the first time. What if I took back my power? I didn't decide right away. I wrestled with it for weeks, the morality of it, the guilt, the fear of what it might do to me. But every time I looked at him, every time I remembered the NICU, every time I thought about how easily he broke us, the decision became clearer. I was done playing the victim. I was done letting him take and take while I sat here drowning. I was going to take something back. I used to believe that forgiveness was a choice, that if you loved someone enough, you could find a way to push past the pain and rebuild. But the thing nobody tells you is that betrayal changes something inside you at a cellular level. It rewires your brain, your trust, your entire sense of safety. For weeks after finding out about James's affair, I felt like I was living inside a stranger's body. Everything felt muffled, like I was underwater, moving through life in slow motion. I'd wake up, feed Ava, fold laundry, make bottles, and pretend everything was normal. But inside there was this constant hum of rage beneath my skin. It was exhausting, carrying that anger everywhere I went. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The night in the NICU, the messages, the fact that he looked me in the eye and lied, over and over again, like it was nothing. Every time he kissed Ava's forehead, every time he called me babe, I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the illusion apart and throw it back in his face, but I didn't. Not yet. I tried, for Ava's sake, to keep the peace. I told myself I'd focus on being a good mother, that I wouldn't let James's betrayal define me. But the reality was, it had already defined everything. One night, about a month after the confrontation, I sat on the living room floor with my laptop open, Ava asleep in her bassinet beside me. I typed how to move on after infidelity into Google. The results were endless. Blog posts, therapists' articles, Reddit threads full of heartbreak and advice. Most of them said the same thing: don't retaliate, it won't heal you. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to take the healthy route, to rise above it all like some enlightened version of myself, but I couldn't. I was tired of being the one who swallowed the pain, who carried the weight while he moved through life without consequences. And then, there it was. A thread from a woman who had been through something eerily similar. Her husband cheated while she was recovering from a complicated birth. Instead of leaving immediately, she cheated back. She said it wasn't about falling in love with someone else, it was about taking back the power he stole from her. She wrote, it wasn't about him. It was about me finally feeling like my body, my choices, my worth were mine again. Those words stuck with me for days. I started noticing James's patterns more. The way he'd stay out late, the sudden increase in work dinners, the constant texting he tried to hide. He didn't know that I knew. And he acted so smug about it, so untouchable. And maybe that's what fueled me the most, the idea that he could wreck me and still walk away clean. I didn't make the decision overnight. It was a slow, messy unraveling of my morals. I hated the thought of becoming that person, but I hated feeling powerless even more. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A friend of mine, Claire, invited me out for coffee. She had been one of the few people who stuck by me through the NICU chaos, and she knew things between James and me were rough, though I hadn't told her the full truth yet. We met at a little cafe downtown, the kind of place where time slows down and you forget the rest of the world exists for a while. We sat there for hours, talking about everything. Ava, work, exhaustion, resentment, heartbreak. And at one point, she looked at me and said softly, "You've lost yourself in all of this." The words hit hard because they were true. I didn't recognize myself anymore. My days revolved around feeding schedules, laundry, exhaustion, and pretending to be okay. I had stopped being a woman, a person. I was just a vessel of survival. When I got home that night, James was asleep on the couch, a half-finished beer on the table beside him, TV blaring in the background. I stood there staring at him for what felt like forever. I thought about the man I met 5 years ago, the man who promised to love me through everything, and I felt nothing. The love was gone. The grief was still there, but the love was dead, and that's when I knew I was done, letting him control the narrative of my life. 2 weeks later, it happened. I won't go into the intimate details, but there was someone, not random, but someone I had known casually for years, a friend of a friend named Matt. We ran into each other at a small gathering Claire hosted, and one conversation led to another, and before I could even process what was happening, I found myself crossing a line I never thought I'd cross. It wasn't planned, it wasn't romantic, it wasn't even particularly passionate. It was something else entirely, something I can only describe as taking back my body. For months I had felt unwanted, invisible, broken. James made me feel like I was too much and not enough all at once. But that night, I felt alive again. I felt seen. I felt like me. I expected to wake up the next morning drowning in guilt, but I didn't. Instead, there was this strange quiet sense of peace, not because cheating was right. I'm not going to pretend it was, but because for the first time since that NICU night, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. James doesn't know, at least not for sure. He suspects I can tell by the way he watches me sometimes, by the little digs he slips into conversations, but I've never confirmed it, and I never will. This wasn't for him. This was for me. And honestly, I don't regret it. That's the thing nobody talks about when it comes to revenge cheating. How sometimes, it isn't about destroying the other person. Sometimes it's about stitching yourself back together in the only way you know how. Does it fix the marriage? No. Ours is over, and I've accepted that. The only reason we're still under the same roof is Ava. We're figuring out co-parenting, and maybe someday we'll have enough distance to be civil, but reconciliation, that ship sailed the night I found those messages, and yet, I don't feel broken anymore. I'm not healed, not completely, but I've reclaimed something James thought he could take from me, my agency, my autonomy, my power. I used to think forgiveness was strength. Now I know walking away is, and that's exactly what I plan to do. The morning after it happened, I woke up expecting chaos, guilt, shame, maybe even panic. But instead, I woke up to silence. For the first time in months, the constant buzzing in my head was gone. The endless replaying of that night in the NICU, the unanswered why, the ache of betrayal. It was all muted, like someone had finally turned down the volume on my pain. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, just breathing. Ava was still asleep in her crib, soft little snores filling the room, and the sun was barely peeking through the curtains. It was one of those rare, fragile moments where the world felt still, and I realized I didn't regret what I had done. Not even a little. I didn't see Matt again after that night, and I didn't plan to. It wasn't about him. It was never about him. It was about me, about reclaiming something James had stolen without even realizing it. When James came home later that evening, I noticed something I hadn't before. The shift. It was subtle, but it was there. For months I had been walking on eggshells, shrinking myself to fit the broken pieces of our marriage, desperate to avoid fights, desperate to keep some sense of stability for Ava. But now, I wasn't afraid anymore. I caught him studying me that night, while we were in the kitchen, his eyes lingering a little too long, like he was trying to read something in my face. Maybe he sensed it. The change, the quiet defiance. Or maybe it was just his guilt projecting itself back onto me. Either way, for the first time since I found those messages, I didn't feel small. Jane started acting differently after that. At first I thought I was imagining it. He'd check in on me more, asking how my day was, offering to help with Ava without me begging him to. He even tried cooking dinner one night, burning the pasta but smiling sheepishly, like we were back in the early days. It almost made me laugh. Almost. But I knew what it was. He felt it. The power shift. Before he had all the control. He was the one who decided when to come home, what to explain, what to hide, and what to confess. He was the one who got to cheat and still sleep peacefully beside me, knowing I was too broken to leave. Not anymore. Now, there was something unspoken between us, an edge neither of us addressed, but both of us felt. The balance had tipped. I hadn't told him about Matt, and I never would, but I could see it in James's eyes sometimes. The suspicion, the insecurity, the way his jaw tightened. When my phone buzzed late at night, he'd ask harmless questions, casually disguised as conversation, but his tone would betray him. Who were you texting? Out with Claire again. Working late. I answered simply, without explanation. I didn't owe him that anymore. And God, it felt liberating. It wasn't about punishing him. I wasn't trying to hurt him the way he hurt me. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't flaunting. I wasn't seeking revenge in the traditional sense. It was something deeper than that. It was about taking back ownership of my own life. For months I had been drowning in his betrayal, trapped in this endless cycle of pain and anger. But now, I felt like I had finally surfaced. I could breathe again. Don't get me wrong. It didn't magically fix everything. I still had bad days. Days where I'd look at Ava and feel this crushing wave of sadness for the family I thought we'd be. Nights where I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got here, from that lakeside proposal, to NICU nights, to this fractured hollow thing we were now. But I stopped blaming myself. That was the biggest shift of all. For so long, James had made me feel like his cheating was somehow my fault, that I wasn't enough, that I had changed, that motherhood made me less desirable. I carried that guilt like a second skin, wearing it even when I didn't deserve it. After Matt, I stopped carrying it. I stopped apologizing for existing in my own body. I stopped punishing myself for his choices. And somewhere in that messy, complicated journey, I found a little piece of myself again, the part of me that laughed loudly, that loved fiercely, that wanted more out of life than just surviving someone else's damage. The more I reclaimed that piece, the clearer my future became. I knew we weren't going to make it. It wasn't just the cheating, it was everything underneath it. The narcissism, the deflection, the way he refused to take accountability for the pain he caused. We had crossed too many lines to ever find our way back. But instead of that realization breaking me, it gave me clarity. We weren't going to work on us. We weren't going to therapy. We weren't going to pretend this marriage could be saved. What we were going to do was raise Ava together, separately, co-parenting, not reconciliation. That was the path forward. I didn't tell James this yet. I wasn't ready. I was still building my strength, still stacking bricks around the fragile version of myself I was rebuilding. But in my heart, the decision was already made. One night, I was sitting on the back porch, after putting Ava to bed. The air was warm, cicadas buzzing in the distance, and the weight of everything finally hit me. Not as pain this time, but as release. I wasn't the same woman who begged James to stay that night in March. I wasn't the same woman who sobbed in the NICU, clutching Ava's tiny hand, praying for her survival, while he was somewhere else, betraying us both. I wasn't even the same woman who Googled how to heal from infidelity at 3 a.m., desperate for answers. I had changed. I had been burned to the ground, And somehow I had built myself back up again, not perfectly, but stronger. And as I sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of the city, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge to destroy James. I already had my power back. Months passed, and the chaos of those first postpartum months slowly started to fade into something resembling a routine. Ava was thriving, chubby little cheeks, bright eyes that seemed to take in everything around her, and a personality that already demanded attention. She had survived the NICU, and so had I. But surviving doesn't mean you're untouched. Surviving means you've been reshaped, sometimes in ways you never imagined. James and I settled into our new dynamic. Not the marriage we had dreamed of, but a civil, functional coexistence for Ava's sake. Co-parenting became a careful dance of schedules, shared responsibilities, and mostly, silence. We didn't talk about the affair. We didn't talk about the nights that had broken me. We didn't talk about the revenge I had taken. It was all unspoken, yet the tension was always there, a quiet undercurrent beneath our interactions. I often wondered if he suspected. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me, the look in his eyes that said he knew something had shifted, that I wasn't the same person he had taken for granted. But I didn't confirm it, and I never would. This wasn't about him. It was never about him. It was about me reclaiming my own life, one small victory at a time. The revenge had done more than I expected. It hadn't healed all my wounds, and it hadn't erased the betrayal, but it had reminded me that I had agency, that I could make choices for myself, that I could feel desire, passion and control, even after being violated emotionally. It was like a spark I thought had been extinguished, had flared back to life. I started making changes in other areas of my life too. I rejoined a yoga class I had abandoned during pregnancy. I started journaling, pouring out the rage, sadness and exhaustion that had been bottled up inside me for so long. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away, friends who reminded me that the world was bigger than my pain, that I was bigger than my pain. I even went back to work part-time, reclaiming a sense of independence that had been stripped away by sleepless nights, constant worry, and James's selfishness. It wasn't easy. Some nights, the memories hit like a tidal wave. I'd wake up, heart pounding, remembering the messages I found, the betrayal that had left me hollow. But instead of breaking me, those memories became fuel to remind myself why I didn't settle for being a victim, why I refused to let someone else define my worth. One evening, as I was tucking Ava into bed, I caught a glimpse of James watching me from the doorway. Our eyes met, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel fear, anger or longing. I felt neutral, calm, solid. "You're handling this so well," he said quietly, almost like a confession. I nodded, giving him a polite smile. I didn't apologize for anything. I didn't justify myself. I didn't need to. I had survived, grown and reclaimed my power, silently, unapologetically, for me and for Ava, and that was enough. I learned that revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reclamation. Sometimes it's about showing yourself that even after being betrayed, abandoned, and emotionally shattered, you can still stand tall, that you can still laugh, love and breathe without apology. I don't tell people about what I did. Most of my friends don't know, and I don't plan to tell Ava until she's old enough to understand nuance, if ever.
Oh.
This was never a story to boast about. It was a story to remind myself that I am resilient, that my life is mine, and no one, not even someone I trusted most, can take that away. There are moments, quiet ones, when I allow myself to reflect on how far I've come. I think about that fragile, terrified woman in the NICU, holding her tiny baby, heartbroken and betrayed, wondering if she would ever feel whole again. And now, looking at Ava's laughter, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face during our walks, noticing the steady beat of my own heart, I can honestly say I am, not perfect, not healed completely, but alive, powerful, free. I've accepted that James will always be part of Ava's life. I've accepted that our marriage ended in a way that broke me, and paradoxically rebuilt me. I've accepted that some people will never see their own flaws, will never take responsibility for the pain they've caused, and that's okay, because I finally see mine, and I honor it. Revenge was never about proving him wrong, it was about proving myself right, that I could survive, that I could thrive, that I could take back my power in a world that tried to take everything from me. And in that I found peace. Every time I look at Ava, I am reminded of why I fought to reclaim myself. She is my life, my joy, my reason for rising above the pain. And every time James leaves the room, or we navigate our co-parenting responsibilities, I am reminded that life doesn't have to be fair to be beautiful, and that strength often comes from the most unexpected painful places. I no longer feel like a victim. I no longer feel broken. I no longer feel like the person who believed she had to endure someone else's betrayal to survive. I am more than that. I am whole. And for me that has always